All right, since we're all here, we have a quorum. We'll call the meeting to order, March 24th, 5:30. This is a Finance Committee meeting. And who we have in attendance is myself, Amy Fiden, Alexi Levine, Valerie Hood, Dylan Barstow-Mans, and we are missing Paul Benjamin. He will not be joining tonight under the weather. So, all right. So we have three groups that we'll be talking to. It's the police, fire, and inspections. Is there any one of you that needs to get out right away? Anybody? Okay.
Well, I've been awake since 2 a.m. if that counts, but I know the fire chief has too. So
then we do have inspections probably going to be shorter, but I'm not seeing that they're on.
Yeah.
Oh, there he is.
go ahead, Tommy.
Yeah, they've been up longer than I have, but I will be really quick. So, but it's your call.
Oh, go ahead, Tommy. You go quick. Go ahead.
Okay. We're ready. Tommy, if you want to just go through your budget, anything you want to point out to us, and Linda, if there's anything you want to start putting things up on our screen.
Yeah, I'm going to work on it. Everything seems to be not going quite smoothly tonight, but I'm working on it. Let's see, where's my screen share?
Everything with mine, I'll start on is cut and dry. The change was the weights and measures, but Linda will explain that better, what to consolidate and all what she's done with that just today.
How's that? Is that on? Are you seeing the inspections budget?
No, not necessarily. We see part of your windows, but we don't see the budget. We see one of your screens though. See the files.
Well, that's embarrassing.
Be open. There we go.
There you go.
Okay, all right. I hope the rest goes better. Sorry about that. So did you want me to explain that first, Tom?
If you didn't mind, that's
Okay.
We didn't get a chance to talk about it, so it'd be better if you explained it. Right.
Okay. Weights and measures. Some of these things, it's taken a while for us to get a handle on since they were since David Nixon ran it with. I mean, this is just one more example of things that he ran with other towns that we really weren't a part of it, but now we're getting it. Weights and measures. The town of Hadley contracts with Northampton to have an inspector come out and do the weights and measures for our Hadley businesses. And they then send out the bill, the inspector sends out the bill, and the payments come here. The way this has been handled up to this year is that they go, the fees that we receive are put into a revolving account. And then we pay Northampton's bill out of the revolving account funds. Now, one of the requirements of a revolving account is if you only have 15,000 in the revolving account, you can't do a check for 20,000. So we had to have all of the money in the revolving account before we could pay Northampton. That was fine up until everything comes down to COVID, it seems, but when the inspections got delayed. Now, Northampton still wanted their payment on time, even though the inspections were running very late and we got past the fiscal year, and we just kind of we haven't gotten quite so that we've gotten caught up. Right now, I think we just finished paying 21 and we have made a partial payment in 22, and they wanted their payment like months ago. So what we have decided to do is, instead of doing it that way, so we're kind of behind the 8 ball at all times, we decided instead that we will put their contract price in a budget so that we can pay that 23,000 we owe them once the fiscal year begins, or whenever they send the invoice, which might be in the fall, even though we haven't collected the 23,000 yet, but we will get it collected, and probably even more than that. And then over on the revenue side, this is since the budget book. Congratulations, Valerie. On the revenue side, then we added that 23,000 in as as revenues. So the net difference to the bottom line of your budget is 0. But this is just a better way of doing business with our neighbor.
Like
Is
it.
that clear?
That makes sense. Crystal clear.
Okay.
They actually went up on the fees with that, but Dee Dee had raised them, through the town prior, so we end up making money off it. Still, at least.
So except for that 23,000, and I've highlighted, I don't want you to be caught by surprise. When we have made a change like this, I'm highlighting it in yellow so that you can see it. The rest of the budget is the same, and Tommy can take it from.
May I just ask a question? I don't really know what weights and measures is. What is that about?
They sub it out. There's not many towns that have somebody to do it, to check all the, the gas stations, the scales at different stores and things like that. And it's
Okay.
done, and Dee Dee just actually made it. They do it so many times a year. I believe it's twice.
No, once.
I'm sorry, it's once a year, and it's a requirement, but we don't have somebody, so it's subbed out to Northampton.
And that most likely is going to go down maybe 1,000 or 2 this year. I've been talking with Charlene over at Northampton. And the other important thing to note is that they have to have it paid for within their fiscal year. So the contract with Northampton says that it's effective July 1st. So we really should pay that right away. And I asked about, has all the inspections taken place on a consistent basis? And they have. So we really should pay it this way, not right now through the revolving account.
Okay, and even last year, what we did is we put the all the inspection services all in one group instead of it was more, and we're consolidating a little more as far as one of the changes you'll see is the going down with the dues membership. It's actually going into tuition, an increase in tuition meetings and that on the budget. And everything is, pretty much same cut and dry, except for Terry Frost that we have in here to continue with the filing and all, and it's going to be split between scanning and all that, split with the planning board, a certain amount of it.
Is that what you're saying? The admin salaries, that's the 8,000 you're saying?
Yes. So that would be the only other change between the weights and measure really that, we're asking is for Cherry to continue with the scanning, which is going to be shared with the planning, which is real dire need of being able to get their stuff scanned in that the old meeting room.
Okay. I don't have any questions. Does anyone else have any questions?
No.
Okay. Well, it seemed like it was those are the only 2 items. It seems like pretty basic, straightforward. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right.
So I guess we can move right along. Let's see. Mike, if you want to go ahead and present your
Sure.
police budget. Or whichever
Absolutely.
Mike.
I'll go first. We actually discussed it earlier. Mike has graciously allowed me to go first. Linda, if you wouldn't mind bringing up the budget fact sheet first, the one that's addressed to Carolyn. What I'd like to do is,
Sure, I'm looking.
yeah, that's all right. What I'd like to do is give the finance committee kind of a 20,000-foot view first, and then really there's only a couple of line items that have any kind of significant increase to them that I'll explain to you, both in police and dispatch. And if there's any other questions that you have, we can certainly dig into there. But I think for both police, and I think Mike is probably going to do it too, for police, dispatch, and fire, it's important to kind of present you a full picture. While Linda's looking at, what I will start and tell you is this. I know that most of you probably, and I know Paul for sure was on the finance committee about 2 years ago before COVID. And I'm not sure if everybody remembers, but we had at that time expressed that we were in need of more officers. And I believe the discussion was for 2 police officers. We asked for 1 because we recognized that, asking for 2 in 1 year is a hard ask just because of cost, benefits packages and things like that. And I actually recall, yeah, that's it, Linda.
All righty, good.
I actually recall Paul, when we were kind of showing him, explaining to him what we needed the officers for and, the workload that was happening. Paul actually was the one that said, it sounds like you need 2. And in all reality, yes, that was kind of the end game. That was the goal, but we were going to do it in a stepped fashion. And that was 2 years ago. That was before COVID. And obviously during COVID, we didn't have any money to do any of those things. And so here we are 2 years later, still really needing those personnel. Unfortunately, what has happened and what you'll see there in front of you is this is the presentation that I made to Carolyn, to Linda, several weeks ago, because unfortunately with police reform and with all of the changes and the unfunded mandates, quote unquote, the extra training that's going to be required and what it's going to cost to hire new officers and things like that. And most importantly, trying to complete our accreditation goal. Part of the reform bill is actually going to put us in a position where you have to become what they call certified, or at minimum, you have to rise to the level of meeting these certain standards that they are calling certified in the reform bill. Now, we're still trying to figure out portions of the reform bill, and that is one of them. But we kind of unfortunately been put into a position that we had to switch our priorities. And instead of asking for these officers that we desperately do need, we have discovered that we really need more assistance in administrative goals. We need to work towards accreditation. We are currently in what they call a self-assessment phase of accreditation. What this means is that we are signed up with MPAC, which is essentially the Massachusetts Accreditation Commission, and we have their list of items that we have to come into compliance with. The self-assessment phase is a phase which allows us to become compliant with these items, policies, procedures, things like that. We're just discovering that it is far too much work for the administrative staff that we have and still keep up with the regular workload that goes with this agency. So what you will see in that full-time wage line is that is a request for 1 police officer. But that police officer is not one of those 2 that we were just discussing. That will not add to our police department. What we will be looking to do is to be adding a police officer so that we can then promote one of our sergeants to an administrative lieutenant position, because 1 lieutenant is not enough to be able to get this job done. We need to have an administrative lieutenant who can work solely on the accreditation portion of things, solely on bringing us into compliance with the reform bill. And then we need another lieutenant who can basically run the day-to-day operations. It's just too much. So, and the other cost that is included in there is the promotion from sergeant to lieutenant, the promotion of a police officer to the vacated sergeant position, and then a new police officer. So that is what the largest increase in any of the line items is on my police budget. The only other significant increase is the training line. And I already touched on it briefly, but because of the reform bill, we have an incredible amount of more training that we have to do to ensure that we are working towards that goal of being in compliance. And we've already started it. We started working toward, there's a lot of stuff having to do with mental health. So we have all of our officers certified in crisis intervention training. These are not inexpensive things to do. They're very expensive to get these officers trained in these kinds of things. So that's why you see the increase in that line. But I wanted to kind of point out to you what's kind of important is that I didn't really know how to approach this situation because those two officers that we were looking for 2 years ago are still desperately needed. And because of the way that we have done things here for so long in asking for personnel, we know we have to be careful about how we go about it. So even though we do need them and we will likely be asking for them in future budgets, I just wanted to make that statement and make folks aware that this is a priority right now. The officers are still a priority, but if we have to do this in a stepped fashion, this is the way that we have to approach it, because we must ensure that the officers that we have here are working under accredited policies, and we're working towards that goal. I want to just make you aware of one other thing, and I'm sure most of you in reading all of my paperwork are well aware of it. It is not in my budget. It is not built into my budget, but you all know that both police and dispatch and DPW, even though that's not really what we're talking about, are all in contract negotiations right now. What you may not know is that the police specifically are vastly underpaid. And because of the reform bill and because of how things are working without any more part-timers, they have been completely eliminated with the reform bill. We are in a position where we must now compete for a incredibly quickly shrinking pool of qualified police officer candidates. I have lost 3 police officers, which is, I think, 20% of my full-time staff for the course of the last handful of months. Every one of them has left either to get out of policing altogether because of how everything has been going for the last couple of years, but mostly leaving for higher paying jobs at other police departments. And these are not, I'm not going to name the police departments, but they are not better police departments. They are leaving strictly for money. And it is that one of the sheets that you have, I don't know if you want me to dig too deep into it, but Linda, could you go to the cost of replacing officer document?
Has it shown up yet?
Do
I have to hit? That's a new share. Okay, I have to. How's that? Is it on?
That's
okay.
it.
All right.
Without beating this to death, go scroll to the second page and the red items. So you have all this information in front of you, and I know it's a lot of information. It's not bulleted. It could be possibly more concise, but I wanted to make sure that you have this information. I just want you to be aware of those above that final paragraph. There's a couple of very short paragraphs that are bolded and also have red in them. And I think you can see just, at a single glance, how much it costs to train and lose and then retrain police officers when they leave. And so in all reality, even though it doesn't actually have anything to do with this requested budget, I think it is important for me to let you all know that we are going through contract negotiations and we are going to have to increase the pay of both the police officers and the dispatchers to make sure that we stop losing people for that reason. I don't think it needs to be any more a part of this budget presentation than you folks having that information, so you're aware. And I hope that it doesn't impact what we're requesting for our budget, because in all reality, if we don't fix that problem, this budget request is going to continue to get larger because we're going to have to continue to pay more to fill these holes. As we stand right now, it is March 24th. So we have 3 months left in the budget. Because of the fact that we have 3 vacancies right now, and because of the fact that we have had to expand our training, how much these officers get trained, I am out of money completely in my training line. I am out of money completely in my part-time line, and I am going to be very close to being out of money in my overtime line. The only positive thing is that the wages that are still left in that line from 3 officers leaving will certainly cover those costs. But it's also the reason that we're expending so much money in the other line. So it's 6 of one, half a dozen the other. I just thought it was important for you folks to know that. So thank you for that, Linda. We can move off of that. And if you want to just jump to the police department budget line item.
Mike, can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
Just going back to the accreditation issue.
Yep.
Is this something where you get accredited and then you're kind of done, or do you get accredited and then you always have to continue doing stuff?
It's the second one. We always have to continue, but once you are accredited, the work that goes into it to stay accredited is much less. It's much easier.
Okay.
There is continued work that has to go into staying accredited because they do change things. That's the problem. When laws change, when case law happens, when a judge makes a certain decision, it sometimes changes policy for police department. You need somebody to be monitoring these things. And when something changes, we need to adjust that policy. We need to then retrain that policy and make sure that all the officers know that policy. That's kind of the upkeep is less, but still a lot of work.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
I have a question about accreditation also.
Yes.
The administrative lieutenant, does it have to be a police officer or could you hire an administrative person?
There are actually people out there who hire accreditation specialists. We have looked into that in the past, and what David Nixon was actually trying to get us funding to hire a part-time administrator to help with that aspect of things. We weren't able to get the funding the year that he requested it, but no, it doesn't have to be a police officer. But the lieutenant that I have right now is the accreditation officer, and so really what we're looking for is not the administrator. We're looking for somebody to take over his role as operations, which cannot be done by anyone who's not a police officer. I need somebody to run the agency while he's ensuring that we're getting accredited.
I see.
One more accreditation question, since we're on that topic. How many other towns around that you have, and you did the survey that I'm looking at, how many of those towns are accredited?
What survey are you talking about, Amy?
One that's the one from Deerfield, I think, with telling us how many.
The wage
Yeah.
study?
Yeah.
Yeah, the wage study wasn't focused on accreditation, but what I can tell you from what I know about the towns on there, there are probably only 4 that I see that are accredited. I know Amherst is accredited. I know Greenfield is accredited. I know Northampton is accredited, and I know UMass Amherst is accredited. I know those for a fact. So 4 out of the, I think there's what, 15 or 16, somewhere around there. So we would be number 5. We would be amongst some really good company when it comes to making sure that we are, among the pinnacle of what policing best practices look like.
And as far as value in money, because I know becoming accredited seems like it does cost us money to get to that point. Not only does it cost us money in training and staffing and all these things that you're talking about, when we're talking about cruisers and things like that, you have to keep them only certain years. So you have to keep things up to date. So can you tell me how it's going to save us some money?
I can tell you that being accredited reduces your liabilities exponentially. So ensuring that you are in compliance with the law, as well as the best practices in policy and procedure, with the fact that policing is amongst the most litigious professions out there, As far as savings goes, I can't give you a number on it, but what I can tell you is that if we are abiding by all laws and policies as based upon accreditation and ensuring the officers are trained to the best of our ability, we will be reducing liability. And as far as the cruiser stuff goes, one of the things that you are allowed to do, and yes, there are limits that they hold you to, but you are allowed to request waivers and things like that. The Accreditation Commission doesn't put a stamp on it and say, when you hit 80,000 miles, you must get rid of these cars. You request waivers for things like that because they understand that there are cost limitations. I think the benefit that we get from being accredited is the liability aspect of it. It brings us kind of a sense of, I guess, safety, but not safety in the sense of, life safety. It brings a sense of kind of safety and protection to the town and to the department so that we can say that we are, I wasn't being facetious when I said it is the pinnacle of best practices because there is no better. So making sure that we are conforming with those and exceeding what the reform bill is requiring, I think is 100% to our benefit.
And how much of the accreditation process will overlap with the reform law?
There is a portion of it. The reform bill, what they call certification, is essentially they have outlined 6 new training practices that have to be adhered to, and they have outlined new officer hires when it comes to the steps that you need to take to ensure that this person is a good fit for the department and certified to be a police officer. And there are also 8 criteria that they identified in the reform bill that you must comply with. When we go for certification and accreditation, we will be complying with not only all of those things, but also, as opposed to the 8 criteria that the reform bill mandates, we will be complying with not only those 8, but 159 more that put us just over and above what the reform bill will require. And that was my goal from the start. When I read the reform bill for the first time, I said, most of this will be taken care of once we get accredited and we'll never have to worry about it again and we will vastly exceed it. So that's what I was aiming for.
So it sounds like there's some good synergy around doing the accreditation and being in compliance with the law.
Yes.
Which is good to hear.
Yes, 100%.
We'll have to do it anyway, so why not go and do for the full accreditation?
Why not knock it out of the park as opposed to just hitting a triple?
Yep.
What's left do you have to before you can get accredited? How much longer? I mean, what tasks do you have before that can happen?
I need somebody who can actually do the work. Right now, we are in basically a holding pattern because we just don't have the personnel to do it. So right now we're in self-assessment, and essentially what we have to do is go through all 159 of these criterias, which are policies, procedures, rules, regulations, how our department is set up, and things like that. And we are just unable to touch it. It is completely backburnered. We have regular police work every single day. As I mentioned, the lieutenant and I were both, awake since 2 a.m. Dealing with a situation that we had last night. It's untenable right now. And with 3 vacancies, not to mention I had 2 officers out injured and I have 1 officer in the academy. So those are regular things that happen. So 3 vacancies very quickly turns into 6. And so we barely have enough people to work shifts.
But I just question if, how long do you think if someone was focused just on that, how long would it take a person to get that done if that was their task?
Our hope once we get back on track and we start working towards it, we actually have 2 or 3 other officers who are going to be assisting. Our hope once we get back on track is to be accredited within the next year. Or actually be certified first, because you have to certify first there's two different levels. There's certification and then there's accreditation. Our hope would be to certify first inside the next year and then go immediately for accreditation.
Thank you.
Yep. So just jumping over to the line items, I don't want to go through all of these. I noted obviously the wages for the full-time officers. I explained what that increase is. Obviously the overtime has to go up slightly when you're adding an additional officer. That's just based upon current spending and what we would estimate, we would be spending with another officer. If we have full staffing, everybody has seen in my budgets in the past that if we are at full staffing, our overtime actually goes down because of the way that we set our schedule up and the way that we put officers in the right places. When people take days off, we do not have to backfill them. We are in crisis mode right now with the amount of vacancies we have. So basically every opening is open. So that's one of the reasons why we don't really need too much in that. And if you notice, that FY23 request is 100,018. I don't know if how many people were on the finance committee back when Chief Huckowitz was here, or if anybody was even on the finance committee. But what I can tell you is that overtime request right there is $4,000 less than when Chief Huckowitz was the chief of the department. So we have the overtime.
I was there, Mike.
Yeah. So Linda, you remember, I actually, I still have the number committed to heart because I saw it so many times. It was $104,715. And so I just kind of wanted to impress upon folks that here we are 10 years after we had, I've been chief for 7 years. We had an interim chief for 2 and Chief Huckowitz was the chief before then. And that number, that 104 number was being requested probably 2 or 3 years previous to that. And so we are $4,000 less and not overspending that line. So I just kind of want to point that out because, the overtime previous to me taking over was always a massive problem. And we have not overspent that line a single year since I've been the chief. So I want folks to I just want to point out that when there are increases there, they are simply to cover, like I said, extra personnel or something like that. They are not overages.
I wasn't there back then, but I remember years ago when I first was on the finance committee being impressed at how your officers were willing to forego their overtime pay so that you could have more police officers.
That's right, Valerie. I remember saying that I said that at town meeting because it was really, a testament to the fact that they trusted me to do right by them and trusted the town that we were going to add these personnel, but they were going to have to give something up, and that was it. And so, we're still in that position. We still have a police department full of officers that love working here, love this town, and do trust us to do right by them. And so we just need to find that balance. So the training increase I mentioned, we need more money in there because we do have to comply with more training. The cruiser lease, this is going to be our first year. We are likely going to have we are likely not going to spend it all because with all of the delays in everything, we still have not received that first cruiser that we were going to lease. So we likely will not have to, with the 3 month, they give you a 3 month grace period, I guess is what it's called, once you sign the lease. So we are likely not going to have to spend all of that. But we don't know. The cruiser could arrive tomorrow. We're not sure. So that's what that request is to cover the cruiser that we've already ordered. And for the upcoming next year's cruiser, half of that payment. Other than that, there aren't any other significant increases with the exception of the uniform situation, but the uniform situation is to cover the fact that we're going to have to send more officers to the academy and we're going to have to equip them, these replacement officers, to backfill these vacancies. We're going to need extra money in that line, as well as one new officer. We are working actually in contract negotiations to hopefully be able to reduce that line. I can't talk much about that right now because we've only had one meeting so far, but I do want the finance committee to know that even though we do need to work hard to increase the wages of these officers, we as the town are also working to be responsible and reduce costs in other areas where we can. And that is one of them. There are reductions in some of these lines to help kind of defray some of the increases. I only cut where I really could, but there are, you know, a good maybe $10,000, close to that in reductions in certain line items. But that's really it. That's kind of the high points. If anybody has any questions on that, I'm happy to answer any of the line item questions. Otherwise, we can move to dispatch.
I do have a question on wages.
Sure.
Is that wage increase, is it just for that one additional officer, or does it take into account increases for the existing officers? Or is that
No.
that's part of the negotiation that's happening?
Yeah, that's actually separate. What that increase is for three separate things. It's for the additional officer, their whole salary.
Okay.
It's then for a sergeant, the difference in cost for a sergeant to be promoted to lieutenant. And then the difference in cost for one of our patrol officers, current patrol officers, to be promoted to that vacated sergeant position. So it's technically two promotions and one whole person.
Okay. And so if I have that situation right, you're going to promote one officer to an admin lieutenant, then hire one officer. But we talked about, like when Paul was saying 2 years back, you really needed two officers. Is that correct?
That's
Is that
correct.
two in addition to that one for the promotion, or is that?
Yeah, that's kind of the problem with the whole thing, is that it's a little confusing because what we were looking for was the two officers for personnel issues. Like the workload here is really incredible. And Amy, you know, got a quick look at it when I showed, you know, just how many cars, you know, these officers are pulling over and how much traffic we actually have to deal with in this town. And so those two officers that we were looking for a couple of years ago, this extra officer that we're hiring is really just going to be, there'll be no gain there because we'll be taking a sergeant out of that patrol package. So yes, in future budgets, we will be hopefully asking for those two positions that we were looking at for 2 years ago.
And so can I ask you, with the wages that are there now, is this just what you can make do with right now? Or is there something, what I'm hearing is there's an issue with the salaries and vacancies, and losing and replacing people costs a lot of money. We're
Yep.
trying to go for accreditation and make sure that we're compliant with law. This all takes a lot of cost, and it needs labor, it needs people. And what I would hate to see happen is this cycle that sounds like that's happening, that's compounding and getting worse and worse. And so I guess my question to you is this just the baseline request? Or if you had it, would you have an additional line for additional wages?
If I was going to approach this in any way different from a stepped approach, which is how we've always approached things, I would be asking for 2 more police officers in addition to the budget that you see in front of you right now.
Okay.
So,
And then in addition, the Route 9 expansion, how is that going to impact your resources as well coming up? Is the state going to help with that, or is that?
no, I mean, the Route 9 expansion is, I wouldn't necessarily say that it's going to significantly impact police operations, with the exception of the fact that it's just going to make things more difficult to get places. It shouldn't necessarily, hopefully not, impact workload, but we're already past the point of kind of a danger workload, you know, place. I don't think I don't think it's going to negatively affect anything else that we're looking at right now. It's already a problem. The way that you said it, Dylan, was actually exactly correct. This cycle is happening, and it's you know, if we don't do something to fix it soon, it's going to compound.
Yeah.
But as far as the state helping us with anything, no, the state's not helping us with anything. We're going to have a nice new road when they're done, but other than that, no, it's just going to be a major headache for about 2 years.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I think it's time to make sure we get the wages filled and make sure these roles are filled. I would hate to see a negative cycle happen out of this, especially when we have officers that are leaving for a salary. And I could imagine it's also hard when you are trying to compete with those other towns, get those officers in, and then also say, hey, we've also got 2 vacancies. So you're going to come into a situation that's already going to be a tough burden. So it's not attractive in a few ways, which I don't like for us. I want us to be an attractive place that's safe and yeah.
So that's actually the best part about it is that, you know, these folks that are actually walking out the door are leaving with a heavy heart because they actually like working here. I actually had one of the officers describe this department as a unicorn department, meaning he loved the town, he loved the people that he worked for in the community, he loves the agency, he likes the people that he works with. Everything about it is something that he said he knows he will never find at another department, but he can't not go. I mean, you know, this department that he went to, they're making $9 an hour more than us. And the adjustment that they made in their rate of pay was specifically to do what we want to be able to do, which is poach good police officers from other places.
Yeah.
I have to pay to train them.
Yeah.
I agree. I agree with everything Dylan said. I think that I would love to be able to give you the resources that you need to have the staff that you want. You know, I'm just a strong supporter of that.
Yeah, I agree also.
I have to agree. I agree, but one of the questions is, you know, and we only have so much part of the pie, right? So much money to do. Why don't we focus on the wages before we focus on the accreditation? I mean, because you're losing so many people, I would think we would want to focus on giving them more money and keeping what you have before we're adding it. I mean, just saying what's the priority, I would think the money would be the priority for the officers to keep them there.
I think Chief Mason is running up against 2 problems right now. He needs to go towards accreditation to be attractive to hire, but he's losing people. I feel for it. I feel like Chief Mason is fighting 2 fronts right now.
That's I'm glad I shut my mouth and let you talk because that's exactly true. Being able to pay officers well is one thing that's great, but I can tell you that knowing what police officers, what young people look for when looking to do this job now is they want to work for a professional police department. And accreditation is going to get us there. I mean, one way or the other, we have to work in that direction. I cannot sit on accreditation and not work towards it because a lot of, as Dylan brought up earlier, a lot of the reform bill is literally tied to it. It's the same. And I can't do that just like I can't work towards accreditation. So it is absolutely 2 fronts. And I really can't choose. I mean, yes, Amy, you're 100% correct. If we lost more, I mean, we've already lost officers that was devastating to lose. I mean, you know, as far as our demographics of our department, you know, we lost a female officer to the state police. We almost lost a second female officer to another agency. We lost the only officer who spoke Spanish to another department, and we just lost an officer with one of the, you know, the greatest character I've seen in a human being in a long time to another agency because they pay more. So yes, 100% saddens me, and I really want to fix that problem. But as Dylan mentioned, we have to fight both these battles at the same time. We have to move in that direction. The law is actually requiring us to do it in certain areas.
You have to appreciate too that this is a small town with a smaller budget, but we're also sitting next to this incredible economic driver that's all these universities and all the extra stuff that happens out of it. So there's an extra load for fire, for police, for ambulance that we need to consider.
The uniqueness of Hadley cannot be overstated. It really cannot. We have a population of 5,400 people. And, according to Mass DOT traffic counts, there are over 100,000 people coming to and through this town. That's your average daily traffic count. I don't know another place that looks like that in Massachusetts at all, at least. So it's one of those situations where it's tough. I get it. It's a very unique town, a small population, and you have this small town feel to it. But as soon as you get towards the center, it turns into West Springfield.
Yeah, that's insane. 20 times our population.
Yep.
109 daily.
So unless anybody has any other questions on that, I can move on to communications if you'd like.
Yes, please.
Okay, Linda, you can just bring, yeah, that's perfect.
Oh, it was there already?
You were there already. It's perfect.
You're good.
I went right by.
So
Is it
just
still there? I
like,
have it there. Okay.
yeah, there you go. That's perfect. It's nice and big. So just like with police, we have fallen behind slightly when it comes to personnel for our dispatch center. Our dispatch supervisor, Megan Cahill, we brought her on a couple of years ago. She has been invaluable in professionalizing our communications department. But we are finding that with call volume increasing, with the amount of officers that we are needing on the road increasing, that we need to work towards having more dispatchers on duty than just one. Dispatchers become overwhelmed in that dispatch center in the drop of a hat. Sometimes it's nice and quiet and there's nothing going on. And then other times you could have 5 people in that room and it would not be enough to handle what's happening. When we had the shooting at Walmart several months back, we only had one dispatcher on, and the dozens and dozens of calls that were coming into her, the radio traffic with the officers trying to arrest the suspects in this, trying to also render aid to the individuals who had been shot. One person was trying to handle all that. It got to the point where she had to go back into the phone system to return phone calls that she had missed because she couldn't answer them. And she was returning phone calls to people who were still hiding in Walmart because they thought there was an active shooter still in the store. So that being said, what we would like to do is move more towards having dispatchers on duty during busier times. And so what we are asking for is one more full-time dispatcher at this point. What I will tell you is that we do not think that's enough. We think we do need 2 full-time dispatchers to cover what we think, how busy this staffing center is. So you have in your paperwork, over the course of the last 10 years, our call volume has more than doubled for our dispatchers. And during that time frame, we've only added 1 person. So essentially what we are looking for is at minimum 1 dispatcher in this budget. And that's that increase that you see right there. There's a small increase in the overtime line that is based upon current spending, as well as an additional dispatcher in the ranks. But like I said, we would like to add this dispatcher, and then myself and the fire chief and the dispatch supervisor will analyze call volume. We'll look at, we're working towards EMD, emergency medical dispatch services. We will analyze it and we will see if the amount of dispatchers we have, if we are granted this new position, is adequate. And then we'll be able to, advise further in future budgets. But for right now, what we are asking for is the only significant increase in the communications budget is that single dispatcher.
And can you remind me, don't the dispatchers, isn't there some overlap? Aren't they EMTs too? Am I remembering that right from a past year, or am I misremembering that?
No, no, they're not EMTs. We do have firefighters as well as police officers who are certified to do dispatch, and obviously all the firefighters are certified EMTs. But our dispatchers, unless they are certified elsewhere, they're not certified as EMTs. No.
I think that's where I was getting that from, firefighters and EMTs.
Yep.
I have two questions on this one.
Yes.
One question is where are we looking at for wages on this compared to others? Are you losing, or is this an issue on wages? Would be one question.
Yeah, go ahead.
And the other question would be, you said something that they had to make callbacks. That was like, I was surprised. Don't we have a backup if the phone's not answered? Does state police get it?
Well, I'll answer that one first because that one's a faster answer. If the calls come in on 911, we do have a backup, and it goes to East Hampton, and they answer those calls on their 911. We were getting a lot of calls on our business lines, of which there is no backup. So she was writing down phone numbers or scrolling back through our caller IDs to make some of these phone calls back to folks. But if they called on 911, it would have rolled over to East Hampton. Here's the other problem, though. East Hampton then has to call us and say, hey, I just got a call that there's a shooting in Walmart. She didn't have time to answer the business line for the person who was in Walmart. She's not going to have time to answer it for East Hampton either. So it was so incredibly busy that her primary concern was making sure that the officers weren't going to be involved in a shootout and that they were getting life-saving apparatus sent out from our fire department and medics to the folks who were shot, because one of the individuals was shot in the mouth and the other one was shot, I believe, in the arm and the abdomen. So it was pretty bad, and that was her concentration at that point. As far as the wages go, we are not remotely as bad in our wage department for dispatchers as we are for the police officers. But what we do need to do is ensure that we keep pace with the other agencies. So we're like I said, we only had one negotiation meeting so far, and I can't get into it too much. Carolyn is aware of what they're requesting. We're approaching it the exact same as the police officers. Anything that we can reduce in other areas, we are doing, or we are going to be negotiating for, but the increase is not even in the same zip code as what we're looking for as far as police. It is much more manageable, and really with this request and that increase, I don't see this being as much of a ask, so to speak, as the police will. That's all I had. I mean, I know you don't want to talk about the wage study and what it costs to lose a police officer and replace one. That's really depressing. But you have that, that paperwork in front of you. I put together the wage study that you have was one that was done professionally by a company for Deerfield. I simply stole it because they offered to give it to us if we provided our information to them. So their HR department sent it over to us. And all I really did was change it to make all the numbers focus on Hadley. So you can look at that and you'll be able to see the departments around us, because in all reality, we're not just going to be competing with departments of like size and like busyness. We are going to be competing geographically with agencies as well for the same pool of officers. Because a lot of people want to work in areas as opposed to specific departments. I can't tell you how many people work for us right now that say, this is the perfect town for me to work for. It's got that quiet small town feel north and south of Route 9, but also has, enough going on to keep me busy in the center of town. So that's the wage study. Like I said, I don't want to beat it to death and go over all the numbers, but if you look at the bottom of that, those numbers in red are not good. Those are our folks. Those are our people. The only ones that are close are the maximum step sergeants that are pretty good as far as being in the middle. But we're the second lowest on that list in both minimum, the step 1 patrol and top step patrol, and the lieutenant is way below. The only places that were good, ironically, are the ranks of police officers that the reform bill has eliminated. We no longer, there is no longer a pool of part-time folks to pull from. We have 3 here in our agency, 3 special police officers, and all 3 of them have been given conditional offers of employment for those 3 vacancies. But because of training rules and requirements and the reform bill, we are unable to hire them as of yet. So they are all set to be attending, hopefully, police academies beginning in June and July of this year. So we have a plan in place. We are working towards that end to resolve these vacancies. The problem is that when they get out of the academy, I don't want them looking in other places to go get hired somewhere else, because they not only have a higher starting salary, but if you look in that second column where it says EDU, those departments also have educational incentives that we can't touch. They're just too high. They offer, pretty significant percentages for having a degree and encourage officers to work towards another level of degree with that incentive. So some of these places are, 10% on top of their salary for an associate's degree, 20% for a bachelor's, and 25% for a master's. That's on top of beating us in a straight up, hourly rate by $3, $4, $5, $6, $7, $8 an hour. I don't know how anybody could say no to something like that unless they really, really loved it. And what I mentioned earlier about the unicorn department, like I said, all of these officers left with heavy hearts. They didn't want to go. One officer came back 3 different times to say goodbye to people because he has such close friends here. So it's a good place to work. It's a good town to work in. We just need to make sure that if people do leave, it's because they want something new or something different. It's not because they can't afford to make a car payment.
So if you had to, if just a quick estimate, like just throw out a number out there, if you had to say, what would make us right, what would we need? Because with all these steps and all these increases, what are we thinking that would be the increase, the difference?
You mean the wages?
Yeah, in the wages. If you had to put a new line.
I would say, over the course of a 3-year contract, we would have to, in my opinion, we would have to get ourselves somewhere in the top third of that list as far as wages. We need to find that middle in maybe the first year and then climb slightly above it in years 2 and 3 to get us into a competitive place to compete with the departments around us.
So even in the first year, how much, if you kind of guess out of all your officers, how much would that be over a year?
Well, what I can tell you is that Linda, if you can scroll down like 1 click and get to the red on the bottom.
Yeah.
That average and that median, you need 12%. You need a 12% pay increase just to hit the median, just to hit the middle of this list.
Okay. So if I
those numbers
took your request right here and times it by 12%, is that what you're saying we would need to increase the salaries by 12? I just want to know where we're going to be, just trying to get an idea of how much it's going to cost. So we
no, I don't think you would do that because there's too much to negotiate around that. There's too much that the town would be able to kind of adjust things to not need to just say add 12% to the total. There's pay scales that get redesigned. We have a 10-step pay scale. The officers are proposing a smaller pay scale, shorter pay scale. So it's really hard to kind of calculate, just saying add 12% or whatever it is. Not to mention the fact that, like I said, it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to hit the middle on year 1. It just means that by the end of year 3, we need to be competitive. And I mean truly competitive. I don't mean scratching the middle area. That's what's going to keep people staying here. And the other thing is this. I hate to say it. I mean, it's really kind of a scary thought. It really is. I mean, I think it's a scary thought. Maybe I'm wrong, but if you were to add 12% to that figure at the end, and then you were to add, say, I don't know, 4 and 4 for years 2 and 3, you're still saving money on what it costs you to lose people. You could literally make these officers, if you read that cost of replacing officer document, you could literally make these officers some of the highest paid police officers around and still save money based upon what it costs us to train and lose people. These 3 people that we've trained and lost is like $400,000. That's how much it costs to train a police officer nowadays and then lose them and then have to do it all over again. So looking at, just throwing those astronomical sounding figures out there, you could give these officers a $10 an hour pay raise, pay them what the officer who just left to go make a job $9 an hour more, and you'd still save like 150 grand. That's me.
I read it and it was pretty interesting. It was very interesting. I could see where you're talking about the saving.
So not only is it smart to keep these incredible officers here and be able to attract high character, good human being talent, but it's also financially intelligent. It's financially the right move. But I mean, Amy, I can give you a better idea as we get, deeper into negotiations or closer to an agreement. I don't know how okay it is to talk about it just yet. I would kind of defer to Carolyn.
When are when is that this year? That's this year. You're going to be.
We've already had one meeting. We have we've already given our initial proposals back and forth, and we have our second meeting set for I want to say maybe a couple of weeks from now, sometime in early April, first or second week of April. Actually, for all 3, the DPW as well. They're all in the same.
So if those all go well, how do we? And those line items are all going to go up because of negotiations. How are we going to? Maybe this goes to Carolyn and Linda. How are we going to balance the budget? I mean, how if those all everything. We're using the base on what it is right now, but we all see a definite need to be competitive.
So part of it will be when those negotiations are over. Part of it is I'm a little hesitant to go into too much detail right now because we are in negotiations. I really would like to kind of end that part of the conversation. But
okay, all right.
It's a little bit. I don't think it's my place to necessarily talk about how we would balance the budget. But what I do know is the timing of settling negotiations would be likely after spring town meeting, and so what normally happens in these 3-year cycles, and I can only say from one experience I've had in doing negotiations as the chief, what normally happened was we would see what we needed as extra in the fall town meeting. I can't say where David got the money or, free cash and covered the costs that way. I don't know how he did it, but that's how it was. That's as far as timing wise, that's how it has happened in the past.
Yeah. And we'll have more insight on receipts, and if they keep trending positively, that could be an opportunity at special town meeting.
Right.
Yep.
And I think your input as the finance committee will be helpful because we will have resources, but it will impact other things. And I think that's really where we would depend on the finance committee to help us with that decision.
That's all I have for you, unless there's any more questions.
No, thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I know that this is a challenging time for you, and I really appreciate your efforts to keep it all afloat while we're trying to manage all these financial challenges.
Thank you, Valerie. I appreciate it. I appreciate all of you. I know it's a tough situation that we're all in. That's why they call it a budget request as opposed to a demand.
Okay, baby.
Well, thank you very much, Mike. I think we're all set for now. We'll reach out to you if we have any more questions.
I'll hang out just for a bit because there's a couple of parts of Fire Chief's presentation I'd like to see, and then I'll jump off. But thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, it's all you, Mike, now. Your turn.
I will try not to stumble over my words as we were also out very late. So I'll try not to drool on myself.
I'm
Anyway,
working on it, Mike. I'm working on getting you on there.
thank you. Thank you. I do have my deputy chief in the office with me too. We've worked really hard on this budget, and again, I pretty much can mirror everything Chief Mason has expressed. It's no secret that we are very understaffed. I put it in our annual report every year. Again, we were also looking at the addition of a full-time firefighter. At the time, was a firefighter IT person. Prior to COVID, we had to put that on hold. And we were also going to be attempting to apply for an additional SAFER grant, which we were rejected the first time we tried it due to the finances of the community. Pro governments, and they don't. I'm sorry.
Sorry,
So
I cut you off.
that's okay. So anyway,
Is this on the screen?
Yep.
The fire? Okay.
yes, thank you. So that's made it a challenge. Again, we have, just so you're aware, we have 4 full-time firefighter EMTs, myself and the deputy, and our shifts run, it's a 4-on, 4-off schedule. So every day from 6 a.m. to 1800 hours or 6 p.m. we have 2 full-time lieutenant, a full-time firefighter, and then myself and the deputy are here. I start at 8:30, he starts at 9, and depending on how the workload goes, we're here till whenever. When we leave at 1800, we go back to the call force. Again, I've expressed to you our struggles with call force. They are doing everything they can. They all have full-time jobs. They all have families. We have extensive training we need to do. They have been very committed to that. But it's really difficult to ask folks to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning like we did last night. And going out to fire alarms when you have to be up at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning to go to your full-time job. So it ends up normally being myself and the deputy. Sometimes, depending on the nature of the call, if it's a more severe call, we will get folks coming out. But I can tell you that the deputy chief and I are 1-2 in ranking for responses from 1800 to 6 a.m. And that makes it really difficult for both of us. Our pagers are never off. They're on 24 hours a day. You can ask my wife. She loves it. She doesn't even hear it anymore, so that's probably a good thing. So that's a challenge. And again, so the budget that I'm putting forward for you, and again, I apologize. My explanations, I did email it to you, Linda, but if you haven't had a chance to look at it, I put some information in it for you. And basically, my contract is up June 30th. So I will be going into negotiations, but the number that you're seeing is pretty much the number it will be based upon the town administrator's recommendation for the cost of living. That's about it. So that's the change there. The wages full-time is the one, again, I can't tell you how proud I am of my members and my full-time members. I can tell you that I have the same turnover issues. So since we started with full-time in 2018, each year we have not kept the same employee. They've gone on to South Hadley. They've gone on to Northampton. They've gone on to all different departments that offer them better incentives, better pay. So it's a challenge again for us too. And it's not that they don't love working here. We are a very busy department for our community. We responded to over 1,300 calls for service last year. And that's just calls. That's not all the inspections and everything else that we do every day. So it's a challenge. 70% of the calls are still between the hours of 6 a.m. and 1800. So that's been pretty consistent. When I built out this whole program, basically mirroring it after the town of Granby, that was their heavy time frame as well. So that's how that worked out, staffing the full-time staff. So the request for funding, I am asking and begging, as I cannot lose the gentleman that I have right now. I really do not know what I would do. I can tell you that they're very upfront and honest with me. They are, I have my senior lieutenant who's been with me since I became chief. He's been taking a look around. He knows that he could certainly, with his talent, definitely could do wonders elsewhere. And I've asked him to kind of remain steady for me if he can. So basically, he's received one raise since he started, one step raise. They are non-union. They don't like the idea of feeling that they need to start a union, but they're at the point now where they see that, DPW and police and dispatch, it seems to be there's a little bit more can see. So, I wouldn't be surprised if we see that coming forward for us. And in all honesty, I would 100% support them on that if they felt that's what they needed to do. Again, that wage full-time, just so you can understand how it works, is under the Federal Labor Standards Act, we are allowed to actually go up to 52 hours of straight time. We capped it at 48 hours. And what that allows for is our full-timers, if they stay for a drill, if they're off shift and they come to a drill, they get paid straight time. If they are on duty and a call comes in at 1800 hours when they're just leaving, that remains at straight time. And then they accrue overtime if they come back overnight for a call. So again, I have to budget for up to 48 hours of straight time. So that's why you see that that higher number as well. They average 40, so the average pay is 42 hours per week. This also includes their coverage for their vacation, holiday time, holidays under the handbook, and a $500 EMT stipend. Most communities will actually pay out their EMTs. An EMT in South Hadley, for example, receives $3,000. We provide them a clothing allowance of $500 every year, which is under a separate line. So my request for an increase this year, and I know that, Carolyn and the finance team has been very supportive of it, is I'm looking to promote Lieutenant McKenna and Lieutenant Washkevitz to the rank of captains. They will be starting their process. We are working with the chief of Southwick. He will be doing an assessment center for me. So my request is to bring them up to an average captain salary. Again, this is not union. This is not adding anything other than what I believe is a reasonable mid-range, hourly rate for these guys for what they're doing. And I kind of put in this for you just as an example of what these guys do. So I can't express their commitment. You've seen it, what they're doing. On top of having to respond to these calls every day, average 2 to 3 calls a day, medicals and fire alarms. I wanted to just go over some value add stats with you basically. So in December of 21, our Park and Rec Santa Claus event, and they're very proud to say that it was the fire chief that broke the truck. I go out every year and drive Santa Claus around, but this year I noticed that the ladder truck was leaning quite substantially. And I told Santa that, you know, he might not need to lay off on the cookies, but anyways, I got it back to the station and noticed that the leaf springs on our 2000 ladder truck had snapped. I called my Lieutenant Washkevitz, who's our maintenance officer. He immediately responded and took the bull by the horns and instantly dove into this project because he knew the priority of this. We are currently first due for all fires in Northampton because their platform truck is completely out of service and they are having issues with getting their new one in because of the supply chain. And so we are first due 24/7. If there's a call that comes in for a structure fire, we are responding to assist our neighbors as they would for us. So I sat down with Brian after and I asked him, just so you could get an idea. So prior to 2018, when it was myself and Lieutenant McKenna, I would have been calling a tow truck on a Saturday at an emergency rate. And estimates that we've received are around $2,000 for us to truck that down to our provider, our service provider in Connecticut. We purchased the parts in-house. That was $2,000. And we purchased so we could replace both sides because I'm not going to replace one that's 20 years old, 22 years old and not do the other. So we didn't have the markup of, I'm assuming at least 10% markup for them. And then for that shop, their average hourly rate is $150. And they usually have two gentlemen that work on the truck. So you can see our in-house repair for Brian's overtime and the parts was $3,273. Sending that out to a repair shop, $10,000 labor in a tow estimate. But more importantly, that ladder truck was in service in 2 days, back ready to respond to Northampton and to our own community. And the estimate, normally when we send that truck down for its annual inspection, it's a minimum of 2 weeks. So we would then be down a ladder truck again, an additional ladder truck in this county for 2 weeks. So I can't express to you, and that the list is so much longer than this. The amount of work the guys do on all the vehicles is just phenomenal. I'd also like to add that these guys, every snowstorm during their shifts are out shoveling the walks, salting. As soon as they come in, they're plowing. You were gracious to give us a capital appropriation for a used brush truck. We added a plow to it, so we're helping out DPW with that. We are mowing the lawns at Center Station and North Station, maintaining that. They're cleaning the buildings. They are going to be washing the front of our Center Station this year, which is a cost savings of an estimate of $932 for a private company to come in. And again, this is about 1/10 of what the crews do daily, never mind going to medical calls and calls for service, including inspections. So I just wanted to let you know that. Again, call force is a spectacular thing. We could never have this department without it, but it's a really big challenge right now. Last night was, again, I responded directly to the scene and I had to wait 10+ minutes for, call force members to get to the station, get dressed, get in the truck and get to that scene. I can just tell you that it's a very frustrating and uncomfortable feeling when you know there's potentially injured people and there's really not a lot you can do until equipment gets there. And I know that the police officers feel the same way. We are very fortunate to have Action, our paramedic level ambulance in-house, which definitely helps. But last night was a very, very difficult call for all of us. I won't go into too much detail, but I had two of our recently promoted from probationary firefighters. They will be receiving their firefighter badges at our dinner that we're having on April 1st. Our two youngins from town, Joseph Boisbert and William Konechny. They were there last night. And again, I have two 18-year-olds that I have to watch and make sure, try and keep them back from some of this stuff because it was, again, a tough scene. So that's why I'm asking. So the total additional request you can see is $374,644. That would bring them up to a reasonable rate And I would be working with the new HR director to create those step scales. So I don't know if you have any questions on that portion, or I can move on.
I do have a question about the request versus the recommends. Could Linda or Carolyn speak to why the recommend came in below the request number?
Carolyn, want me to, let me start. I mean, because some of this is just is mechanical. I'm sorry, am I muted?
No, we can hear you.
Okay. So is that all right, Carolyn? You want me to explain?
Yep. That's
Okay.
great.
So there's a couple of things you're gonna see when you get to the part one on the when we get to the ambulance budget. So this is partly a call that they made at the time when Mike made a request for additional expenses to have a what's that position? The emergency responder.
Full-time firefighter, paramedic.
Right. Okay. In the ambulance budget. And related expenses such as $500 uniforms and some $4,000 of overtime. So a total request in addition, as you see, I'm way down below there, was $80,745. So we put it in the fire department budget because we really didn't, because the ambulance wasn't an active budget yet, but he really feels it's better in the ambulance budget and we're going in that direction. So rather than put an ambulance item in the fire budget, I've moved it back. So that's again a zero bottom line difference, is that we took the $80,000 back out of fire and you're going to see it added to the ambulance budget. So that's part one. And part two, we were just going over this afternoon. And I did make the changes as per our discussion, and that was that I didn't quite catch up to that part. On the wages full-time, I had pulled the $76,000 out and put it in ambulance, but I didn't have time. I didn't check with Carolyn and I didn't remember about it. So Carolyn, you can speak to what your new recommendation would be on that line.
So as far as, I'm sorry, I'm just.
So Mike, now,
remember.
I know yeah, it is. So we took, well, that recommendation is your prior recommendation less the ED that went to ambulance. And then today we were discussing the additional amounts that Mike has just spent time describing for the 4. So that's about a $29,000 increase from your prior request. But I didn't get back to you to see if you approved it. So I guess I'm just asking, or based on our meeting, I assume you did, but I don't want to speak.
Yes.
For you.
Okay. Well, no, that was, I think I'm following it. I'm sorry.
So
I'm a little lost. I'm not going to lie on the difference between the two. Is it just lagging? It didn't get updated before getting sent out?
It should be 370. Carolyn, it should be. You're approving what Mike asks for, right? The 374. Okay.
I can explain
I mean,
it as
this
well.
was 4 o'clock this afternoon, so I didn't get it.
Yeah, it was like 5 up to like 5:30 actually.
I can also add if you'd like. So so you see the salary of the fire chief. Originally, the salaries were held out of the original budget proposal because we were discussing what we were going to be doing, the COLA and everything else. And that's why also that amount, once I was able to do that evaluation of communities around us. And again, we also had in here the firefighter paramedic that you'll see under the ambulance budget. It's basically, it didn't have time to get caught up, especially with me being behind as well. So
There's another change on there, Mike. I'm sorry. I was just.
no.
Okay.
No other change.
Okay. So I can have it up in a minute. But I will tell you what it changes, and I will send the revised one out to finance committee members. But if you want to write down on your own, or just make a note that this bottom line of town administrators recommended, instead of being 848,916, it is now 878,103.
All right, that clarifies that for me.
Okay.
I have no other questions on that.
The overtime portion basically just reflects the increases, and it's not, basically that allows for 100 hours of overtime per firefighter, and then we fill in the remaining, because we have well over 300 hours that we normally have to cover. With call force members, myself and the deputy, we cover when we can.
And are you dealing with the same issues that Chief Mason is dealing with you're both having short staff because you need additional payroll, but vacancies as well? Or do you have every position currently filled?
I now currently have all my positions filled. The newest one is 6 months old.
Okay.
That's why you'll see, if you look at our current budget, we're over on overtime. We had a gentleman who went out injured and then moved on to Northampton. They keep poaching us. We're trying to poach back, but a lot of these guys want to become paramedics. So yes, I was also asked when COVID started as well to hold off on applying for an additional SAFER grant. So the plan is to apply for that staffing grant under the federal government, under FEMA. Basically, if we were lucky to get approved this time, and we'll be working with a professional grant writer to see if we can somehow really clarify the dynamic of Hadley, that yes, we are 5,000 population, but that 100+ thousand that you hear coming into town every day, how that impacts us and how we can get around that. Again, verbatim, it was looking at the stabilization account, looking at the free cash. That's what the federal government came back with, asking what the need was. That was their response to us when they rejected us the first time. But we are going to try for it again. That would provide for full pay for 3 entry-level firefighters at their full pay and benefits. And then the town would take on that. The hope is if we were lucky to get approved, that would allow us the time we need to get our ambulance from a BLS level, which we'll discuss when we go into the ambulance portion, to a paramedic level service. We would basically mimic what we're doing now with a paramedic basic bus, and start bringing that revenue in for us to support our budget. And if we are not approved, we will be coming back to you to try and figure out another way we can handle this, because we desperately need to somehow staff 24/7. So that's where we're at. We can't maintain this anymore. So that's what we have for that and overtime. The other big ones that you'll see are, this is the one Mike, I believe, was going to stay in. We just wanted to confirm with you. So last year at Capitol and also during the budget, we expressed the concerns about our radio system. I am proud and happy to say that phase 1 of that capital project, which replaced our 2 consoles, is almost complete. We have the 2 new consoles in now, so we are up to date. We're working out a few little minor bugs on paging and toning and everything. The final part 2 of this was replacing our receiver sites, which is the Hampshire Mall, the North Station, and the Center Station, with repeater sites, which would make us simulcast, which basically means wherever somebody keys a mic, it hits a antenna and allows much better communication. I can get you I believe you got it last year, but Goosetown, our radio contract provider, was gracious enough to give us the 2020 pricing, keep that quote live for us. So that's the $78,000 increase you're seeing under that fire equipment radio repair and maintenance. So I basically combined 2 lines in conversations with the accountant and everybody else. We have just excessive numbers of accounts. So we put like accounts together. So there's $14,500 that goes to our annual maintenance of our consoles and our radios. And then there's $3,200 for purchasing new batteries, repairing radios if they break, pagers, things like that. The $78,000 would be part of a 5-year lease program. which includes a 5-year maintenance. So they are on the hook for taking care of any issues as a result of it. So it's more of a maintenance issue, in my opinion, than capital. And then after that 5-year lease agreement, we own the equipment, and then we would figure out and make sure, we would see what we would, I'm not sure what that budget would look like after that. We would have to evaluate after that. So in coordination with the townwide fiber that was under the North Station project, we are just about complete with that. We're working to find a pathway into the mall, so we will have high-speed fiber to that receiver site as well, which will also add to the speed and power for this. So like I said, we're at a very good point right now, and we had expressed to you that if we were unable to put this into this budget because this seemed the most appropriate, we would have to come to you again with another capital request for $388,091 to get that done, because we can't jeopardize, with all the stuff you're hearing about shootings in Walmart and motor vehicle rollovers, we can't have these dead spots where we can't have our officers and firefighters communicating. So the system, as you are aware, the consoles were end of life. They've been in here since 1996 when the building was built. So they don't even make the parts for them. And it's the same thing with our receiver sites. It's time for them to be updated. And that would hopefully bring us whole on our radio systems. So that's what you're seeing in that increase.
The 78,000, is that yearly for the lease, or is that 78 over 5 years?
It's 78 over 5 years, and then we would evaluate what the cost would be for any, if there's, the technology is changing so frequently, it's kind of like buying a computer now. So we would have to evaluate what, that 14,000 that we normally have in the maintenance budget might be more to keep up, so we don't go back to where we're at now.
And then does police and ambulance use this antenna system too?
This is public safety system. Yes.
Why,
So
why is it only under fire then?
What's that?
Budgeting? Why is it under fire only for budgeting? This might be a Linda question.
This was done. It was felt that because I've been handling all the radio communications, the licensing and everything else. I'm the one that worked out the contract and the estimates with Goosetown. We could split it if you felt that was better, but we felt it would be easier just numbers wide to put it under the one budget, kind of like we did so fire alarms, generators, sprinkler systems are all under my budget for all the buildings in town, and generators. So we kept this under this line.
And you're appointed, you have a position, right? It's an emergency. What's your title?
Well, I'm emergency management director as well.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. So
And Dylan, that's an approach we've been taking the last year and a half, is where did certain amounts make more sense? So you'll see we've moved things under the select board where every department uses it, like legal. Every department uses the legal line item, but it just made more sense to be and more efficient to have it under one department. So in some of these, we looked who kind of oversaw it the most. Instead of trying to, doing a third, dispatcher. Enterprise funds, you have to do that. That's the way enterprise funds are set up. But you'll see this ongoing that we did a lot of the consolidating last year, but we're continuing to do that.
Okay. Yeah, I guess if that's the approach, then that's how we should do it. It just makes the fire look overweight.
That's what I said.
In terms of increases.
I like overweight.
he doesn't love it. He doesn't love it. But it also gives you, when you split things between budgets, you don't get a sense of what the total cost is either. So now it's 78,000 a year for 5 years, and it's in one place. You don't have to, flip the pages and look at the other amounts. So
Yeah,
it feels a little more transparent to me, but
yeah, definitely transparent in terms of what the cost is. I would argue it would, yeah.
That darn fire department asking for all this extra money.
Yeah.
I hear you.
I would have to say, I like it in one line item instead of separating it in the two, police and fire, but we were expecting it in the capital because we had discussed it in prior years. So we knew about the consoles. We thought that was a good idea. We think that that it's well needed, but sometimes I still think that it's good to see these the capital items in capital, and not that they're not any more needed. I mean, but they're just, you know, once it's, and you have a 5-year plan, which is great. So then it's not the one-time $390,000, but it is a definite needed item. I just sometimes like to see them over in the capital instead. That was just my opinion.
Yeah, it's an alternative, Amy, and then the funding source, I suppose you could still make it, usually when we put something in capital, we're either paying for it, we're doing it by borrowing, and then it has to be within the levy, which we clearly don't have enough room to do that height of 300 and something thousand this year. Or it would be debt exclusion, which has the possibility of being voted down, and it's kind of item we don't want to be just putting out like that. There is that other possibility within, I mean, you could even take the lease and put it within capital and say, this one we're funding by free cash with a lease over 5 years, because ultimately this is coming out of cash, and the capital item you could designate to come out of cash. So, you know, there's an argument to be done either way.
We're spending the free cash on either the operational or the capital, but I think these things that are capital should stay in capital, even if we pay it for free cash. I'm not saying, you know, we have to look at paying it, and I think that is a danger thing that you're saying. You know, we want to make sure it gets paid, and I don't want it to be part of debt exclusion, because you don't want to put that at risk. I get that, but the problem is when we start moving all these things out of capital, we're doing away with capital. And I don't necessarily think that's the right thing to do either. I think that, we need to have it separated.
Yeah, it's a lease, which puts it on a little bit different a category. But if you want to put it on the agenda for capital, we could, that's fine too. I don't think that.
There is another issue though, if I can just, oh, sorry, go ahead, Amy.
I just think it should be up for discussion. It's just how we're paying. We all think it's an important thing. It's just how we're paying for it. It just needs to be up for discussion.
If I can just give this input, my concern is, I'll give the ditch maintenance as an example. The ditches hadn't been taken care of for so many years. It was time that they had to be addressed. So an article was passed to fund it. But what happens is then you finish funding it, and then they go back to being neglected again. Yeah. This is an area that I think almost a ditch and a radio system is different but critical. And so this way, you're going to have the awareness that this is such a critical, truly an infrastructure for communications, that you can address it each year, but that has to always be getting replaced with updates and things like that. So I think that's another comparison. So because ditches now are under the DPW operating budget, because that has to keep maintained. It can't be once you finish the article spent that you stop maintaining the ditches. So that's kind of a comparison I would use for why we did that.
Yeah, and I get that, and I'm the one that actually said the ditches probably should go in under operational because we needed to keep going with it. It's not that I want the whole thing to go, because the equipment, the radios, the repair, the maintenance, that line item still needs to be there. Mm-hmm. It's only the one piece that I'm talking about, because you only replace, that's where the big amount is replacing a piece. I'm not saying get rid of the line item, because you're going to need to keep maintenance up. You're going to have to keep that going.
And it's a pertinent part of their operations. So yeah, it really needs to be in the operational budget. And I don't know of any town that doesn't have this in their operational budget.
Yeah, that's why I agree. Maintenance needs to be there. Maintenance, you do have, and I'm not talking the whole thing. I was only talking about the one piece of equipment that we had talked about in capital. you have those, you talked about other pieces of equipment, right? You had the 14.5 for something and another 32, you had other pieces. It's not just one piece.
Yeah,
that was used.
the 14.5 is for the maintenance contract. So if we have an issue with the console, or, you know, with one of the, if they have to come out and service something, that's part of that. And then the 3,200 or whatever other portion it is, you know, our batteries, they don't last forever. We have to buy new batteries annually. We have to purchase new microphones, you know, or antennas or things like that, whatever. You know, it's kind of like us purchasing the 5 sets of turnout gear a year. We try and keep up with it so we don't have to come and ask for, you know, another 98,000 to buy mobiles and portables. We try and keep it on a cycle of keeping up with it. So the only reason why, and again, it's totally up to you, but the maintenance or this, you know, this 78,000 does include a maintenance contract as well with it. So that's why it, in my opinion, it you know, it fit well in there, but again, that's totally up to all of you.
Okay. So my last question on, just to make sure I understood this, Mike, on the last thing, on the wage, just on your budget alone, the wages that we talked about for the 374,000, that's not in that particular one because you changed it. That's not new people. That's just getting us to where we need to be, right?
Correct. That's strictly just to get the promotions done and
Yep.
the increases in pay to the firefighters.
Okay, thank you.
It sounded like earlier when you were talking, though, it sounds like you do have a staffing, like you need more people. Is that correct statement?
That is correct. Yes.
How many people would you staff if you could, out of curiosity, additional?
So you haven't seen the ambulance budget yet, if one of them wasn't in the ambulance budget. So if, when we look at the ambulance budget, you feel that that's reasonable, then it would be an additional 3. And that would allow us to go to 24-hour shifts with 2 folks on. So we'd have a truck rolling out the door immediately.
And would that just bring us to a proper baseline for right now? Or is that looking ahead to the future with expansion of Route 9, additional businesses, additional population growth? Or would that's just getting us to now?
So basically what that would do, based upon the review of when calls are occurring, so 70% between that, you know, 6 a.m. and 6 p.m., where you have 4 on, not to say that we can mount a fire attack with 4 people. I mean, ultimately, it would be great if we could build it out more, but right now we're looking to just comply with OSHA standard. So OSHA standard is 2 in, 2 out. So my deputy and myself, we're still operational. So if there's a call for a fire, we are part of that 4, and hope that call force members can show up. At night, we're talking about, you know, the false alarms, the lift assists, the investigations. Again, we would still be strongly relying on our call force to respond at night to support the full-time, you know, if we went to those 24-hour shifts with the addition of those 4. Ultimately, I'd love to say 8, but that's past my retirement time. In my opinion, I think that would be, I think the 4 would be sufficient at this point.
Thank you for that. No, it's good to pay attention. We're looking at the next year's budget, but there's a lot of growth that we're going to see here. And we're just talking about stuff that we're trying to catch up with over the past years of COVID. And we're going to have to catch up with COVID stuff and then also run pace with what's coming ahead of us for growth in this area.
The other thing I'm hoping that I'll be able to get to you is, you know, again, we haven't looked at the ambulance budget, but if we can start bringing in some revenues with response for missed calls, second calls, you know, our med one's going out and we have a motor vehicle accident with multiple vehicles. You know, if our ambulance that we're slated to get in June, when we get that into service, probably by the end of the year, that can potentially bring in some revenue to support the staffing that we're trying to create. So I'm hoping I can have some good news on that for you.
That's all I had. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah.
Well,
Oh, I'm sorry.
okay. I just wanted to say, you know, I think I've been on the finance committee for 7 years now, and I remember one of the very earliest meetings I was ever at, you were pleading for essentially the same thing that you're pleading for now, you know, and it seems like as a town, we need to muster the will to give our people what they need to do their jobs well, so that you're not exhausted like you are all the time, you know, right now. And I just don't, you know, speaking not as a finance committee member, but just as a person that lives in the town, it's a little upsetting to me that we don't seem to be able to muster the generosity to give our people what they need, even though we have seen during this pandemic just how generously our you and your people have been taking care of us as a town. And I'm feeling, honestly, I'm feeling frustrated. I don't know what we can do to muster the will to give you what you need.
I agree.
Thank you for that.
I think we're going to look at, it's going to be economic growth and taxes, and specifically growth, especially if we want to keep low tax rates. And if we're going to talk about economic growth, why not lean on Route 9? And if we lean on Route 9, we're going to need fire and police. So
Right.
we got to start somewhere and start investing in our future. So
But
I agree
mean,
with what you said, Valerie.
even just growth. I mean, I feel like, you know, our taxes are so low, you know, and I'm a person who has property in town, and I appreciate the low taxes, but there comes a point where we need to not be so stingy as a town.
Well said, Valerie.
You know, and I think the same thing every year, and I think it's going to get, but you know, like but you know, here you are looking, you know, Mike is sitting here looking so exhausted because he's been up since 2 o'clock, and he's been doing this for years now.
I appreciate that. I do. It's been tough, but again, I made the choice, and I honestly, I love Hadley, and the guys who work here love Hadley too. And I couldn't do it without them. And that's why that's the biggest priority for right now is I've talked with the town administrator numerous times that if I lose either of my lieutenants, I don't know how I'm gonna do it. My deputy has been gracious not to leave me. He's been asked to apply for multiple chiefs positions. He's got his act together, and he's committed to this community too. And you know, he's coming here at 2 a.m. from South Hadley. And
Yeah.
again, I can't thank them all enough.
Well, you know, and the thing is that, you know, as much as we all love living in Hadley and working in Hadley and working for these departments that are so well run, it's still a time comes when you have to make your decisions for yourself and for your families based on your earning potential. And, you know, when we're talking about $10 an hour more in another town, it just seems like almost a no-brainer. It's just, it's upsetting. And I don't know what, I don't know how to marshal the town's energy to raise the taxes a little bit so that we can give you all what you need.
Get to a point that we're doing it well, not just doing it.
Yeah.
That you said, Mike, we got to get to a point where everyone's feeling good, doing well, staffed appropriately. That's the goal. It's not just getting to a baseline.
Sure.
Right.
I appreciate
Exactly.
it. Yep. The other items are pretty minor. So I did throw in the building maintenance account again for you, just so you can evaluate the costs. Like I said, our fiber's not quite complete yet. I'm hoping that we can get prior to July 1st. We have about 3 to 4 weeks of time frame before we can go live with the fiber, make sure all the bugs are worked out. I'm hoping we have the equipment ready to go so that we'll be able to go live with our fire alarm monitoring. So I had to budget it for just because the delays in materials and everything has been just crazy. So I'm hoping that you'll see a decrease in that because we're going to start monitoring our own buildings' fire alarm panels. So instead of paying, 7 buildings having fire and security, our dispatchers will be monitoring the calls right in our station. So I'm hoping that you'll see that cost savings I'm doing the best I can to try and get it done before July 1st. The only other thing is our PPE. Again, that line went up because I combined accounts, and then unfortunately with the supply chain again, we called our supplier for our 5 sets of turnout gear, which keeps us from going. We can't have turnout gear more than 5 years or 10 years of age. So we have a 5-year. Each year we buy 4 to 5 sets along with helmets and boots and equipment the guys need, so that we keep up with that. And it allows for, if I have 20 call force firefighters and full timers, those 5 kind of keep us going. And we have a 17% increase for turnout gear this year. So, we're looking at $4,000 to $5,000 per set of gear. Anyways, we are also, the deputy chief and I are also working on a assistance to firefighter grant for our air packs. Our air packs are now 2 editions out of NFPA. So we should be kind of high up on the scale for that. So we'll be applying for that AFG grant to see if we can fund that, which would be huge for the community because those units are, really expensive. So we'll hopefully have good news for that. We have started. We do have one unit we purchase per year, so we are putting them aside right now, so that we're not, we're trying to get caught up. But I'm hoping that we'll be successful on that grant. And that's pretty much those are the substantial lines for the fire department budget.
I have a question which I forgot to ask Mike about, and the other Mike, but and it's in your budget as well. I'm noticing your gas budget is down 1,500. I would have, I know maybe you did this before the gas prices. Is that a realistic number at this point?
Every year I do basically an average. We normally would get a cost estimate based upon what the FRCOG sent out. I'm pretty confident with that amount. Not to say that if it goes up to $5, $6, $7 a gallon, maybe not so much. But looking at the numbers and doing the averages, right now I'm feeling okay.
Okay.
If not, we'll just tow it with a tractor.
I'm all set. The
Yeah,
fire
no-
department.
No more questions on fire for me.
All right, so I did email out to you all a corrected budget and also his explanations, which I hadn't seen earlier, I guess came in prior to the meeting. So you now have all of the materials that we've been showing on the screen and better. So are we ready for ambulance?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'll try. No, that's not it. Okay. How do I get that? Sorry, folks. No, it keeps telling me I failed. I'm just gonna keep. They do have it in front of them
Okay.
if you want to get started on it, Mike.
Yep. So the ambulance service, so Action EMS.
There we go.
Thank you. So Action EMS, and again, this the $299,440 is what we're paying fiscal year 2022. I had a conversation with Action, and I, in my opinion, feel that we're at a tipping point for our subsidy. And I requested that, with COVID, with the fact that we're receiving an average, so year one was, we received a full $267,000 reimbursement of the subsidy. Year two, we received 140. Year three, last year with COVID, it's gone down over the past 2 years because of COVID. We received 99,000 or 98,000. And so I requested that they freeze the basically the contract rate, and they agreed to keep it at the 299,440, which is what we're paying this year. So that's about a $8,000 savings for us. The additional lines that you see are the request for a full-time firefighter paramedic that would be responsible for establishing the foundation for the BLS ambulance, which is slated to come in from Northampton. That's the $20,000 capital request that we made. Again, supply chain issues. We were supposed to have this in December. It's been pushed off. They are anticipating their new ambulance to be here by the end of June. So it's going to take us approximately 4 to 6 months to get certified, get everybody trained. Action will be assisting us. They will continue on with EMD. They will also be doing our billing for us. And I can tell you there were averaging approximately between 100 and 150 second calls for ambulance service a year. So basically, like I said, the car accident where you have multiple victims, Action Med 1 is out on a call. We have a second medical come in, which happens quite frequently, in all honesty. So we're looking at, basically our day staff would cover the ambulance, and then the deputy chief and I would, we would be responsible for responding, in the fire truck if necessary, or vice versa. Call force, we have a good number of EMTs on staff right now, so we're working on putting a plan together with that. And we're also working with the University of Massachusetts on teaming up with their UMass EMS program. And so we're working with Tony Maroulis and their coordinator to see if we can tap into some of those resources. They have normally 132 EMTs at the university that we'd like to poach or start utilizing. And I know there's quite a bit of excitement on the university side with that. So kind of a hybrid approach, but that's what we're looking for. And we know we have a lot of work ahead, but we really need somebody that's going to be available to do quality control, to ensure that invoicing is happening properly, that reports are being written correctly, training's happening, everybody's certifications are up. And I can tell you I'm hoping that we'll attract somebody. This is not a high range for a firefighter paramedic. Normally you're seeing, this rate with a pretty substantial stipend, but I figured this is a reasonable ask for where we're at for a BLS service. We do have to run at a BLS level for a minimum of a year. So we're anticipating 1 year following that to actually go paramedic level in coordination with Action. And we would then have this paramedic who could staff that ambulance, so that we would have our first paramedic ready to go. And it would be our intent to model our service after, like I said, after Action with a paramedic basic bus. So you have a paramedic and an EMT basic responding to the calls. So that's the cost for, that's again, some overtime and then a $500 clothing allowance.
I have a handful of questions, but does anybody else have questions on this before I jump in?
I think that it's a great idea to get started, a good investment in the town.
So my questions are, so this is a one-person paramedic that we're seeing in the wages, Mike?
Correct, yes.
So, and right now, when we go with action, are we getting time in for the BLS time? Is what you're doing now?
We don't have an ambulance yet, so no, we do not,
Oh.
we have not started running our ambulance.
I was thinking when you go behind them or you ride along or because you're going to them, I didn't know if that counted.
Unfortunately, our EMTs can practice as EMTs if they're needed on the ambulance, but we're responding as first responders, emergency first responders. So basically we're assisting, we do have, it's an ALS BLS interface program that we do with action so that our folks can assist the paramedics. We can drive their ambulance. Hypothetically, we had Med 2 come up for a second call and they needed, they needed assistance with a driver, we could help them. So that's basically our role right now, is to make sure that we're trying to get our return time back really quickly. So packaging patients, the goal is getting them to the hospital as fast as possible. So whatever we have to do to assist the medic and the EMT to make that happen, that's the goal of our guys. Numerous calls where we have, full cardiac arrest, where we have police, fires, 6 to 8 people working patients at the same time, and then attempting to get them packaged and into the ambulance and going to the hospital. So very, very high acuity calls that really are, you need all hands on deck. So, what? Yeah, and then just better patient care, my deputy wanted to add, we've been hearing nothing but positives from the ER. We are very fortunate to have tops of actions, medics and EMTs here. One of them actually joined the call force. He's an EMT basic here and would love to come up here and be part of our team. And I would love, he's an amazing person. So again, I'm really proud of that whole system that we built out. And again, we're getting a return on our investment. We weren't getting that before. So we're getting something every year from that. On top of great patient care and quick response times. Our average response times are now, between 4 and 8 minutes. It used to be 8 to 16. So just think about that when you're not breathing.
I see the ambulance go out often, but I'm always seeing your guys going out with it. A lot of times, your deputy or someone else. There's always someone with your ambulance, helping out. So that's great.
Yep.
What my next question is going to be, if we could talk about like a revolving fund or make it an enterprise fund. That we talked about that, so that we could try to look at taking those bills and having this support itself.
Yeah, we actually have been working. I've been in conversations with the chief of East Longmeadow, as he's done something similar, and Carolyn's been helping me with that. But we're looking at a special revenue account. The enterprise account is a little bit of a challenge because you have to specifically budget. The special revenue account allows a little bit more flexibility, and then setting that up so that we could basically put together our own capital plan for example, the Northampton ambulance is going to have to be replaced at some time. So start putting that funding away for that next ambulance, for evaluating what the costs are that are shared between the ambulance service and the fire department, and, supporting that with those funds. So yes, we are definitely 100% behind putting together that special revenue account for that. And working with finance, with select board on, how we wanted to use that and how we could support the community with it.
If I could add, we are looking to get that hopefully in place for FY24, unless we have a reason to revisit it sooner, like in the fall. But we just didn't want to put the cart before the horse. We don't actually have the ambulance on the road. So once we get the ambulance and someone doing, we get this in process and it starts bringing in revenues, then we won't be subsidizing ambulance anymore. And then it's in a much better position to operate under a special revenue account. And another possibility, other than it just covering its own, if it does well, that we're hoping that it will be able to fund, provide more of this assistance in public safety. Isn't that right, Mike? It's not just going to be an ambulance fund.
That's absolutely the hope. And again, after our, our 1-year trial basis, if we decide to amend the contract with Action, and pull out that, you're looking at, a $299,000 payout, contract rate, that would then come back to the town. That's, a significant amount of money on top of the funds that are, that are coming in. I can tell you that when I became fire chief, actually prior to that, when I started this whole process, the OEMS director was, she never understood. So this is back in 2007, 2008, why Hadley didn't have 2 ambulances in place then. I mean, if you think of the number of times we're requested just to go mutual aid to Northampton with our Action ambulance, and to assist other communities around us, just as an example, just as how busy these systems are. A couple of weeks ago, we actually had to call down to 4th on our run card to get an ambulance to respond to Hadley because there was nothing left in Hampshire County, in this part of Hampshire County. We called Northampton, Amherst, South Hadley, and South County, and we finally ended up, I think, bringing in somebody from, I think that was it, South Hadley, District 2 finally started coming in. But again, it's just amazing how overstrained all these systems are right now.
I don't have any other questions.
Or do I?
I really appreciate you taking the time to go through this with us, and Deputy Chief and I really thank you.
Well, thank you for everything. And I hope you get some sleep.
Appreciate it. I'm looking forward to doing what that little gentleman's doing right now.
Yeah.
I wish you would sleep like this without being in my arms.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. I do appreciate to see, I see you everywhere. I mean, it's, and now that I know you're, I see you at the school. I see you, you're all the time at all the calls. I mean, you're definitely hands-on.
Yep.
So.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. So I guess we're all done with the 3 departments that we have that we're talking to today. Is there anything else, or did someone wanted to bring up, or someone want to make a motion to adjourn?
Well, I don't want to pick a bone, but I'm wondering, is there something we can do to raise awareness in the town about the need, about how hard the chiefs are working, and what challenges they're facing with staffing because we're just not giving them enough? Is there some way that we as a group or individually can try to bring it to our fellow townspeople's attention so that they can see the value in letting their taxes go up a little bit?
I don't know how you would do that, Val. You could always write a letter to the editor too. I mean, there's things like that. I mean, sometimes, but I don't know how you do marketing.
Well, you could make a motion to spend more money on those departments and see if the rest of the finance committee would get behind you. So you need to start giving us gifts. I'm in trouble.
So Val, I can let you, one of the things that I had an opportunity to do is the reminder, the new weekly that's out in this area. They asked me to write an article about this, kind of like the state of Hadley and what 22 and 23 was going to look at. And in all my correspondence, even with our local businesses, but even in this article, I did focus on public safety, and that word poaching is become very popular among the towns. And I'm going to tell you, you don't want to hear this, but other employees in other departments are getting approached by other towns on a regular basis.
I'm
You
not
guys
at
are
all
very-
surprised.
You're
Yeah.
very fortunate that those employees that work here are so talented. They're known by other, even if it's a private organization that is a vendor for us. We had one employee within about 4 hours last week. I was ready to just go crazy. He got approached by 3, just in his daily, what he was doing out on the field. So, but if I can just have this opportunity, I'm very concerned about both of those departments. I do use the term unstable when I'm talking about those 2 departments. I am very concerned about Chief Spanknable, and Chief is, I don't know that 3 or 4 days go by when I don't say, how was your night? And he goes up out on another call, because he's not getting, the call firefighters now are very different. So he's not getting, he talked about one that he has gotten from Acton, but he's getting, just not the level of, and I don't want to say dedication, it's just people's lives are so different now. They're busy. So to rely on call firefighters after 6 o'clock at night, it's very concerning to me. And even talking with the police officers, I had a great opportunity to talk with Janelle Seitz, I think that's how you pronounce her last name. And I just had an opportunity to talk with her and said, what is it like to be a police officer right now? And she really focused on some of the challenges just within Hadley. And she said, I'm always training somebody. That's what I spend half my time doing, is training a new officer. And she also said that she sees how much money is wasted on the training. But more importantly, which I don't think you get to see in the presentations, is she said, so much of in those departments is you have to trust your coworker or trust your partner who you're riding with. You get to know your instincts. You don't have to talk to each other because you're working with each other so much. So when someone leaves, it's very devastating to the people that they've left. And like Mike said, they don't want to leave, but they have to. And I think it is important to look at how it's impacting the employees now, because you want to keep, you have an amazing, I can't believe the dedication you have in these departments and all of the departments here. And then even last night, there was a really horrible call that the call firefighters had to go to. And these were 2 young kids. And bless, Mike Spanknable and all public safety, the police officers who were there, they wanted to protect these young call firefighters from seeing a really tough scene. But that's hard. That stayed with me all day when I heard that. But I'm so concerned about Chief Spanknable and Evan. They are working, they're not getting a full night's sleep. They're listening to that pager all night long. So I really felt like it'd be irresponsible if I didn't share that with you.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm just hoping it's not going to take a catastrophe to make us finally wake up and muster the will to pay a little more.
It's out there. It's out there. I mean, and it's important right now. We're seeing it in fire and police, but it's out there, and it's in all kinds of industries, and people are poaching other people in all kinds of different industries. It's out there, and we got to stay on top of it to be, so that we're not in trouble, other companies are doing it. It's hard, but that's what's happening. Prices are going up. People are having to pay more because to keep their good people. That's what's happening in our economy now. So I think that it is an important thing that we have to look at, because we can't be at the bottom, because we can't have people doing this to us, other towns. It's important.
I think about how, I know that there are a lot of people who have lived in this town for generations, and I'm not that, I'm a newcomer. And I chose to live here for all the same reasons that, everyone loves living in this town. But I feel like there comes a time when it's just, we're almost being irresponsible. We're almost being dangerous, not to give our people the resources that they need to do the job.
I think on some of it, we should probably be doing on a more of a regular basis. It seems like we do we go out and we will hire someone to do the survey or to look, and we'll do something on it, but then it's instead of being in front of it, we're constantly trying to catch up.
Right.
So it would be something that we should probably be looking at funding on a regular basis, and so, yes, we're looking at maybe police and fire, but we gotta keep up on all the departments, and it's something that we should keep up on a regular basis. And do it not just and maybe, I don't know how many years, every 5 years we look at it again and look at it again, so that we're not behind. Sue?
I think if we can get a true classification study that is comparable to other towns, and that we follow step increases, but we don't follow step increases for non-union. And so that's why you keep getting pushed back. So that is our goal, is to get that in place where it's every year, the steps that they're entitled to, they will get, and they will stay competitive, but we can't just give them one-time increases, or we really have to follow a step, a classification schedule.
I think public safety has hit critical mass at this point. We cannot continue to be a training ground where we lose all of those dollars that have gone into training just to go someplace else for $9 more an hour, because the numbers are huge in the training. It's not just training an officer, it's the replacement officer while the person is training. So we really need to look at that very carefully. And I think, quite honestly, that's a first step. These guys are exhausted.
You
Yeah.
can see it in Mike's face today, for
Mhm.
sure. And again, I think it's also not, just the safety folks. I think it's also, like if we lost you, Sue, all that institutional knowledge, all of that stuff that you just that would be lost. And I feel like that's probably true for all of the people, in the town. They just have so much knowledge that it would just be a tragedy to just lose that because we're stingy.
And I've been poached.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised.
I'm not certain I'm willing to give up my commute. I'm 10 houses down the road. So.
Well,
But yeah, it is good that we have so many great people and they're willing to work with the town, but we also have to reciprocate that. We can't just keep using the goodwill, and it's time to pay it back. Everyone
You're
just
right.
went through everything with COVID. So we asked a lot from them then, and we're hearing some of those repercussions with both mics tonight. So I hope we find more money for them continually through the next few budgets.
The other thing is, I've said it before, and I continue to feel this way, is because you have unions for all the police and everyone else, the non-union people really get hurt in this. And I need us to be strong with the non-union people, because I don't want to encourage any more unions. So I think we really need to focus on the non-union. And that COLA is not enough just because the unions go in and they can negotiate, but just getting a COLA every year is not always enough for the non-unions. So when I see, now the problem is we have a budget. We only have so much money. How do we disperse the money? I mean, it's not like if we had an unlimited, if we were the government and could make our own money and just give it out, that would be great. And, but we only have a certain bucket. So how do we decide who gets part of that bucket? That's the hard part. I just rather give out instead of, and just in my opinion, I rather sometimes give out more money to our existing people. I rather see our existing people get more than have new people sometimes. So I just want to see us do a little more for who we have in-house.
And we have to take a look at the consumer price index. This is what, 7%? And we've allowed 2.5% COLAs. So we're already behind the 8 ball, and we don't know where health insurance is going and that type of thing. Obviously, groceries, gas, just our living expenses become more. So, those type of things need to be taken into consideration.
Right.
Totally. You need to get more income. Give it out in expenses. Focus on some economic development. We could poach all of Amherst's. We could eat their lunch. We ate their lunch with retail on Route 9. We can eat their lunch on housing because Amherst doesn't have their act together with housing. Just a proposal. I'm passionate about that in a different way. So.
I like that.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're on it, Dylan.
Yeah.
Okay, so should we make a motion to wrap up? I make the motion that we terminate this meeting.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good night, everybody. Thanks for everything you do.
Good night.
Thank you.